The silence in the master bedroom of the grand estate was not the peaceful quiet of a resting home. It was the heavy, suffocating stillness that precedes a violent storm. Raymond stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the manicured lawns of his estate. He did not look like a man who had just dismantled a 19-year marriage. His tailored suit was immaculate, his posture rigid and unyielding. Across the room sat Beatrice. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her knuckles white against the dark fabric of her skirt. She looked at the man she had built a life with, searching his face for a flicker of the warmth that used to define their relationship. There was nothing, only a cold, detached indifference. "I don't understand, Raymond," Beatrice said, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to remain steady. 19 years. 3 children. We built everything together. You can't just hand me a set of divorce papers and tell me it's over without a single reason. "I have given you my reason, Beatrice," Raymond said, not bothering to turn around. "I am tired. I am drained. I no longer wish to be married to you. That is all the reason you require." "That is not a reason. That is an evasion," she cried out, the pain finally breaking through her calm facade. "Is it someone else? Is there something I did wrong? If I neglected you, if my focus on the children made you feel isolated, tell me. We can fix it. We can go to counseling. Think of the children, Raymond. They are at such critical stages in their lives." Raymond finally turned, his eyes flat and devoid of emotion. "There is no one else. You have done nothing wrong. I am simply finished with this chapter of my life. My lawyers have already drafted the settlement. You will receive a generous allowance, but the house, the primary assets, and the family name remain with me. Do not make this harder than it needs to be." The coldness of his delivery felt like a physical blow to Beatrice. She rose from her chair, walking over to him, her eyes pleading. "Please, Raymond, look at me. Look at the woman who stood by you when you were just a struggling businessman. We made a promise. You can't just discard a family like old clothing." "The decision is final, Beatrice," he said, stepping past her without a second glance. "I expect you and the children to have vacated the premises by the end of the month." The heartbreak was not hers alone to bear. That evening, the heavy burden of the news fell upon their 3 children. Tobias, who was 16 and bore the protective instincts of an eldest son, Arthur, 14, quiet and deeply observant, and Valerie, 12, whose innocent world was instantly shattered by her father's words. They sat in the living room as Raymond delivered the news with the same clinical detachment he used in his corporate boardrooms. "But why, Dad?" Tobias demanded, standing up, his fists clenched at his sides. "You can't just kick Mom out. What did she do? What did we do?" "This is an adult matter, Tobias," Raymond replied smoothly. "Sometimes relationships run their course. You are old enough to understand that." "No, I don't understand," Tobias shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. "You're ruining our family for nothing." Arthur sat in the corner, his eyes fixed on the floor, absorbing the shock in silence, while Valerie began to weep softly, clinging to her mother's arm. Beatrice held her children close, her heart breaking for them far more than for herself. In the weeks that followed, Beatrice refused to give up without a fight. She swallowed her pride and reached out to Raymond's family. Her father-in-law, Silas, and Raymond's elder brother, Vincent, were called to the estate for an emergency family intervention. They sat in the grand dining room, attempting to talk sense into a man who seemed to have lost his conscience. "Raymond, this is madness," Silas said, slamming his hand on the mahogany table. "Beatrice has been an exemplary wife. She raised your children. She supported your ambitions. She has never brought an ounce of shame to this family. On what grounds are you discarding her?" "I have already stated my grounds, Father," Raymond said, sipping his drink calmly. "I am tired of the marriage. I want my freedom. There is no law that requires a man to stay in a home where he no longer wishes to reside." "Freedom from what?" Vincent interjected, leaning forward. "From a loving wife? From your own blood? If she did something, if there is a grievance, tell us. We can mediate. But you cannot simply throw your family to the wind because of a whim. The public scandal alone will affect the company. The company is secure, and my decision is absolute," Raymond stated, his voice rising slightly, the only sign of irritation he had shown. "If Beatrice tries to fight this in court, I will prolong the litigation until she is completely broke. Tell her to accept the settlement and leave with her dignity intact. Silas shook his head in disgust. You are acting like a man possessed, Raymond. Mark my words. A man who tears down his own house with his bare hands will eventually find himself shivering in the cold. Despite the family's intervention, Raymond remained unmovable. Realizing that further pleading would only devalue her dignity and prolong the agony of her children, Beatrice decided she had had enough. She refused to beg a man to love her or his children. We are leaving, Beatrice told the children one evening, her voice carrying a newfound strength. We do not need his charity, and we do not need his permission to be happy. We will build our own life. With the modest settlement funds she received, far less than what a billionaire's wife was legally entitled to, but enough to avoid immediate poverty, Beatrice packed their belongings. They walked out of the mansion without looking back, leaving Raymond alone in his vast, empty kingdom. The transition from a life of boundless luxury to one of strict budgeting was a harsh shock, but adversity revealed the true steel of Beatrice's character. She refused to sink into depression or self-pity. Moving to a modest 4-bedroom house in a quiet, working-class suburb, she immediately went to work. Using her settlement money and a deep-seated passion for culinary arts, Beatrice opened a small boutique catering and pastry business named the Silver Whisk. In the beginning, it was exhausting. She would wake up at 4 in the morning to bake, manage the accounts during the day, and handle deliveries in the afternoon. The children, seeing their mother's relentless work ethic, grew up overnight. Tobias took up a part-time job at a local grocery store after school to help cover his own expenses. Arthur took charge of keeping the house clean and helping Valerie with her homework. The luxury they once knew was gone, replaced by something far more valuable, a deep, unbreakable sense of solidarity. Mom, you need to sit down and eat, Tobias said one evening, gently taking a mixing bowl from her tired hands. Arthur and I can finish packaging these orders. Go rest. Beatrice smiled, wiping a stray strand of hair from her forehead. I'm fine, Tobias. I just want to ensure we meet the deadline for the corporate luncheon tomorrow. This contract could change everything for us. And it will, Arthur said, walking into the kitchen to help his brother. Because your recipes are the best in the city. Now go to bed, Mom. We've got this. As the years passed, Beatrice's business flourished. The Silver Whisk expanded from a small bakery into a highly successful commercial catering enterprise with its own event hall. The financial strain eased, and peace returned to their lives. During this period of rebuilding, Beatrice met Julianne's father, a kind, supportive widower named Gregory who owned a local printing press. Gregory did not possess Raymond's immense wealth, but he possessed a wealth of kindness, respect, and emotional stability. They married 3 years after the divorce, blending their lives. Gregory treated Tobias, Arthur, and Valerie as his own, providing the stable, loving father figure they had been violently denied. Beatrice and Gregory eventually welcomed 2 more children, creating a vibrant, noisy, and genuinely happy household. However, the shadow of the past was not entirely gone. It was when Tobias turned 21 that the ugly truth of their past finally came to light. Vincent, Raymond's brother, had maintained a distant but respectful relationship with Beatrice, occasionally checking in on the children. One afternoon, he requested a meeting with Beatrice and the older children at a quiet cafe. There is something you all deserve to know, Vincent said, his expression grave as he looked across the table at Beatrice, Tobias, and Arthur. I know it has been 5 years, but the truth has a way of coming out. What is it, Vincent? Beatrice asked, sensing the gravity in his tone. Raymond didn't leave because he was tired of the marriage, Beatrice, Vincent revealed, his voice laced with disgust. He had been seeing a woman named Diana for over a year before the divorce. She was a young model, a master manipulator. She convinced him that he was wasting his prime years with a domestic life. He chased you and the children out so he could bring her into the mansion without any legal complications or bad press. Tobias's grip on his glass tightened so hard the knuckles turned white. A side chick, he spat, the venom in his voice palpable. He threw us away like garbage for a mistress. Yes, Vincent sighed. He married her privately a few months after you left. He has shielded her from the media, but within the family, it's an open secret. I am deeply sorry. We suspected it then, but we only obtained proof recently when he integrated her into his corporate assets. Beatrice sat in silence. The revelation hurt, but it also brought a strange sense of closure. The years of wondering what she had done wrong, the sleepless nights questioning her worth as a woman and a wife, all of it dissolved. It wasn't her failure, it was his corruption. "Thank you for telling us, Vincent," Beatrice said quietly, her voice devoid of bitterness. "But that man no longer concerns us. He made his choice, and we have made ours." 10 years had passed since the day the gates of the Raymond estate closed behind Beatrice and her children. Tobias was now 26, a successful project manager at an engineering firm. Arthur, 24, was a practicing accountant, and Valerie, 22, had just graduated from university with a degree in child psychology. They were accomplished, emotionally grounded, and deeply loyal to the mother who had sacrificed everything for them. It was a Sunday afternoon, and the entire blended family was gathered at Beatrice and Gregory's spacious suburban home for a family dinner. The laughter in the living room was interrupted by the sharp ringing of the doorbell. Tobias went to answer it. When he opened the door, his smile vanished. Standing on the porch were Silas, his grandfather, now visibly older and frail, and Vincent. "Tobias," Silas said, his voice trembling slightly as he looked at his eldest grandson. "It has been a long time." "Grandfather, Uncle Vincent," Tobias said, his tone polite but guarded. He did not invite them in immediately. "What brings you here?" Hearing the voices, Beatrice walked to the hallway, followed by Arthur and Valerie. When she saw her former in-laws, her expression softened with natural hospitality, though she remained cautious. "Silas, Vincent, please come in," Beatrice said, stepping forward. They were led into the formal study, away from the rest of the family. The atmosphere was instantly thick with tension. Silas looked at his grandchildren, noting how much they had grown into strong, capable adults, completely independent of the family fortune. "We have not come to disrupt your peace, Beatrice," Silas began, his voice heavy with sorrow. "We have come out of desperate necessity. It is about Raymond." At the mention of their father's name, Valerie's expression hardened, and Arthur crossed his arms, stepping closer to his sister. "What about him?" Tobias asked coldly. "Did he run out of money to buy another mansion?" "No," Vincent replied grimly. "Raymond is dying, Tobias. He is in the intensive care unit at the City Memorial Hospital. He has been suffering from severe acute liver failure and systemic complications. His condition has deteriorated rapidly over the past week. He is in desperate need of specialized medical attention, continuous care, and a matching blood transfusion to stabilize him before he can even be considered for any advanced surgeries." A heavy silence filled the room. The children looked at each other, but there was no sorrow in their eyes, only a profound indifference. "And why are you telling us this?" Valerie spoke up, her voice sharp. "He has a wife, doesn't he? He has that woman he threw us out for. Let her take care of him. Let her spend some of that billionaire money on private doctors." "Valerie, please," Silas pleaded, a tear escaping his aged eyes. "The woman is gone." "What do you mean, gone?" Arthur asked, narrowing his eyes. Vincent rubbed his temples, looking thoroughly exhausted. "It is a disaster. 2 weeks ago, when Raymond's condition became critical, the doctors stated he needed an immediate, compatible blood transfusion due to a rare blood subtype anomaly he possesses. Diana's 2 children, boys aged 8 and 6, whom Raymond believed were his sons, were brought in to be tested for a direct familial match to expedite the process." Vincent paused, taking a deep breath before delivering the final blow. The laboratory results came back. Not only did their blood types completely contradict any possibility of a match, but the genetic markers proved definitively that Raymond is not their biological father. The children belong to another man. Tobias let out a cold, humorless laugh. Poetic justice. The man who abandoned his real family for a fantasy got exactly what he deserved. "It gets worse," Vincent continued. "When the medical report was delivered to the house, Diana realized the deception was uncovered. That very night, while Raymond lay semi-conscious in his bed, she cleaned out his private safe. She transferred a massive sum of liquid corporate funds, millions of dollars, into offshore accounts and fled the country with the 2 children. We have alerted the authorities, but she is gone, and Raymond was left entirely alone in that massive house, drowning in his own medical crisis. So, the side chick ran away after stripping him dry," Arthur stated, his voice flat. And now that he has no one, you come to the people he discarded 10 years ago? You want us to play the role of the saving angels? He is your father, Silas cried out, his hands shaking. Whatever his sins, his blood runs in your veins. The doctors say that without stable family support and an exact genetic match for his blood subtype to keep his system from crashing, he will not survive the month. He is broken, children, not just physically, but spiritually. He has asked for nothing because he knows he deserves nothing. But we, his family, are begging you. Please, do not let him die alone in that hospital. He chose to be alone the day he kicked us out. Tobias shouted, his anger finally erupting. He didn't care if we were starving or sleeping on the streets. He told Mom he was tired of us. Go back to his empty mansion and tell him that we are tired too. Tired of his memory. Tobias, sit down, Beatrice said. Her voice was not loud, but it possessed an authority that immediately silenced the room. The children looked at their mother. Beatrice stood up and walked over to the window, looking out into the garden where her younger children were playing. Her mind raced through the memories, the pain of the divorce, the sleepless nights, the triumph of her new life, and the profound peace she had found. She looked back at Silas and Vincent, seeing two desperate men carrying the weight of a broken family. Give us a few minutes alone, please, Beatrice said to her former in-laws. Silas and Vincent nodded silently and stepped out of the study, leaving Beatrice alone with her three eldest children. Mom, you can't seriously be considering helping him, Valerie said, her eyes wide with disbelief. After everything he put you through, the humiliation, the pain. Beatrice walked over and sat down among her children, taking Valerie's and Arthur's hands in her own. Tobias stood nearby, his chest heaving with residual anger. Children, listen to me, Beatrice said softly. The anger you are feeling right now is completely justified. He broke his covenant with us, and he acted with a level of cruelty that I never thought him capable of. But look at where we are now. Are we broken? The children remained silent. No. Beatrice answered her own question. We are strong. We are blessed. We built a beautiful life out of the ashes. If we refuse to help a dying man out of pure spite, then we let his past cruelty change who we are. We become defined by his bitterness. I did not raise you to be vengeful. I raised you to be honorable. It's not just about vengeance, Mom, Tobias said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. It's about justice. Why should we save a man who didn't care if we lived or died? Because you are better than him, Tobias, Beatrice said, looking directly into her eldest son's eyes. Because when a human life is on the line, we do not weigh it on the scale of their past sins. That is for God to judge, not us. He is your biological father. If he dies and you had the power to save him but chose your pride instead, that guilt will follow you for the rest of your lives. Don't let his final legacy to you be a heart filled with regret. Arthur looked at his mother, his analytical mind processing her words. You survived him, Mom. You rebuilt everything. If you can find it in your heart to face him, then I suppose we have no right to hide behind our anger. Valerie looked away, a tear rolling down her cheek, but she nodded slowly. If you go with us, Mom, I won't face him alone. I will be there, Beatrice promised, pulling her children into a tight embrace. Every step of the way. An hour later, Beatrice called Silas and Vincent back into the room. We will come to the hospital, she announced. The children will be tested for the blood transfusion. But understand this. We are doing this out of human decency, not because we owe Raymond anything. Silas wept openly, grasping Beatrice's hands. Thank you, Beatrice. You are a far better soul than this family ever deserved. The atmosphere in the private wing of the City Memorial Hospital was clinical and sterile. The steady, rhythmic beep of the heart monitor was the only sound as Beatrice and her three children entered the intensive care unit. Raymond lay in the center of the room, surrounded by an array of tubes and medical machinery. The sight of him was shocking. The formidable, arrogant billionaire who had once commanded rooms with a single glance was completely gone. In his place was a gaunt, frail man with sallow skin, deep yellowing in the whites of his eyes from liver failure, and a body that seemed to have shrunk to half its former size. When the door opened, Raymond slowly turned his head. His eyes, clouded with pain and exhaustion, landed on Beatrice, then moved to Tobias, Arthur, and Valerie. A profound look of shame washed over his face. and he immediately closed his eyes, turning his head away as a single tear tracked down his hollow cheek. The chief hematologist, Dr. Vance, entered the room shortly after, holding a clipboard. "Thank you all for coming so quickly," Dr. Vance said, sensing the immense tension in the room. As Vincent explained, Mr. Raymond has a highly specific blood subtype anomaly. Given the acute state of his liver failure, his body is rejecting standard blood bank supplies, causing severe hemolytic stress. We need an exact genetic match to stabilize his system before we can proceed with any advanced liver therapy or surgical interventions. Since his other legal children were found to be non-biological, you three are his only hope. "We are ready to be tested," Tobias said, his voice completely businesslike. The three children were led to the adjacent laboratory, where blood samples were drawn for immediate compatibility testing. Beatrice remained in the hallway, sitting quietly on a plastic chair, her mind clear and focused on the task at hand. 2 hours later, Dr. Vance returned with the laboratory reports, a look of profound medical astonishment on his face. "This is remarkable," the doctor stated, looking at the charts. Usually, even among biological offspring, blood subtype compliance can vary significantly based on maternal genetic overriding. But in this case, all three of your children, Tobias, Arthur, and Valerie, possess a 100% perfect phenotypic match with their father. Any one of them could safely donate. Silas, who was waiting nearby, let out a breath of relief. "Thank God. So, can they all donate to speed up his recovery?" "No," Dr. Vance explained. "Given his fragile cardiovascular state, we cannot mix multiple donor profiles in a short period. It would risk an adverse immune response. We must select only one primary donor for the intensive plasma and whole blood extraction sequence. Based on optimal red blood cell density and physical stamina, we have selected Arthur as the primary donor." Arthur stood up, rolling up his sleeve without hesitation. "Let's get it done." "I wanted to do it," Tobias muttered, a lingering sense of brotherly protection kicking in. "You'll be here to help me walk out when it's over, big brother," Arthur said with a faint smile, trying to lighten the heavy mood. The procedure took several hours. Arthur lay on the donor bed, watching the dark red fluid flow through the plastic tubing into the collection apparatus. It was a surreal realization. The very life force that Raymond had tried to sever 10 years ago was now the only thing keeping him anchored to the earth. Throughout the entire afternoon and into the night, Beatrice did not leave the hospital. When Arthur was finished and resting with a glass of juice, Beatrice walked into Raymond's intensive care room. She sat in the chair beside his bed, watching the fresh blood from their son slowly infusing into his frail body. Raymond opened his eyes, looking at her through a haze of medication and tears. "Beatrice," he whispered, his voice nothing more than a hoarse rasp. "Don't speak, Raymond," Beatrice said gently, reaching out to adjust the blanket over his shoulders. "You need to rest. The children are here. Arthur has donated the blood. You are going to be stable." He closed his eyes, his chest heaving with silent, painful sobs. The woman he had discarded was now the only one guarding his bedside while the world he had sacrificed everything for had vanished like smoke. The transformation was not overnight, but Arthur's blood transfusion provided the critical biological bridge Raymond's body needed. His system stabilized, allowing the medical team to administer advanced targeted therapies for his liver condition. Over the next 3 weeks, Raymond was moved from the intensive care unit to a private recovery suite. Throughout his recovery, Beatrice maintained a constant presence. She coordinated with the doctors, managed his dietary restrictions by preparing specialized nutritional meals from her own kitchen, and ensured that he was never left alone with his thoughts for too long. Gregory, understanding the profound moral duty his wife had undertaken, supported her completely, often bringing her fresh clothes and taking care of the household so she could focus on this act of mercy. The children visited occasionally. Their presence was not filled with joyous warmth, but rather a quiet, respectful observance. They saw their father's physical recovery as a testament to their own strength and their mother's grace. Finally, the day arrived for Raymond to be discharged from the hospital. He was still weak, relying on a cane to walk, but the color had returned to his face, and his eyes were clear. Instead of returning immediately to his empty estate, He requested a private meeting with Beatrice and their 3 children in the hospital's private conference room. They sat around the table, mirroring the arrangement of that fateful night 10 years ago. But the roles were completely reversed. Raymond was no longer the arrogant king on his throne. He was a man who had stared into the abyss of his own undoing and been saved by the very hands he had bitten. Raymond looked at Beatrice, then at Tobias, Arthur, and Valerie. He placed his hands on the table, his fingers trembling slightly. 10 years ago, Raymond began, his voice thick with an emotion he could barely control. I stood in a room and looked at the 4 most precious people in my life, and I told you that I was tired of you. I told you that you were no longer worth my time, my fortune, or my love. I lied to myself. I lied to my family. And I committed a sin that I have spent the last weeks realizing is utterly unforgivable on my own merits. He paused, a tear falling onto his clasped hands. I thought wealth and a superficial fantasy could replace a lifetime of devotion. I was blinded by pride, by vanity, and by a woman who saw me only as a bank account to be plundered. When I was at my lowest, when I was dying in that bed, abandoned by the illusion I traded my soul for, I knew I deserved to die alone. I expected to die alone. Raymond looked up, his eyes red and pleading as he fixed his gaze on his children. But you didn't let me. Tobias, who defended his mother with such ferocity. Arthur, whose very blood is pumping through my heart right now, giving me a second chance to breathe. Valerie, who grew into a beautiful woman despite her father's abandonment. And Beatrice. He turned to his former wife, his voice breaking completely. The woman whose heart I broke without mercy, yet who stood by my bed like a guardian angel when everyone else had fled. I do not ask for my wealth back. I do not ask for my status. I ask for nothing but your forgiveness. I am a broken man, and if I spend the rest of my days begging for your mercy, it will not be enough to repay the debt of life I owe to you all. The room was silent for a long moment. The heavy weight of 10 years of separation, anger, and hidden pain seemed to lift, evaporating into the quiet space of the room. Tobias looked at his siblings, then at his mother. He saw the peace in Beatrice's eyes, a peace that came from a heart that refused to harbor hate. Tobias stepped forward, walking to the head of the table where his father sat. He extended his hand. The past cannot be erased, Dad. The pain was real, but we are not the same people we were 10 years ago. We survived, and we built a life. We don't need your money, but we don't need the anger anymore either. I forgive you. Raymond gripped his son's hand, weeping openly. Arthur stepped up next, placing a hand on his father's shoulder. My blood is in your veins now, Dad. Make sure you use it to live a better life. I forgive you. Valerie walked over, her tears flowing freely now. She bypassed the formal handshake and wrapped her arms around her father's frail frame. I missed you for 10 years, Dad. Don't ever let us go again. Raymond held his daughter tight, his shoulders shaking with the release of a decade's worth of guilt. Finally, Beatrice stood up. She walked over to the man she had once loved with all her heart, the man who had caused her the deepest pain, and now, the man who had been humbled by grace. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. I forgave you a long time ago, Raymond, Beatrice said softly. Not for your sake, but for mine and the children's. We do not hate you. We never did. We just wanted you to find your way back to the man you used to be. The restoration of the family did not mean a return to the old ways. Raymond did not resume his role as the tyrannical patriarch, nor did Beatrice leave the beautiful life and family she had built with Gregory. Instead, something far more mature and profound occurred. Raymond used his immense wealth to set up trust funds for all of Beatrice's children, including the 2 from her second marriage, viewing them all as part of an extended tapestry of lives he was duty-bound to support. He became a frequent, welcome guest at family gatherings, sitting at the same table with Gregory, sharing stories, and laughing with his children. The mansion that had once been a symbol of isolation and arrogance was converted into the corporate headquarters for the Silver Whisks Charitable Foundation, dedicated to supporting single mothers and displaced families in the city. One evening, during a massive celebration for Valerie's engagement, the entire family was gathered in the garden of Beatrice's home. The air was filled with joy, laughter, and the bright light of lanterns hanging from the trees. Raymond stood on the terrace, watching Tobias and Arthur joke with each other while Valerie danced with her fiancé. Beatrice walked up beside him, holding a glass of wine. They look happy, Raymond said, a peaceful smile on his face. They are happy, Raymond, Beatrice replied, looking out at the family. Because they learned that love is not something you buy, and it's not something you can discard when you get tired. It's something you fight for, even when it's broken. Thank you, Beatrice, Raymond whispered, his eyes shining reflecting the lantern light. For teaching me how to live again. Beatrice clinked her glass against his. To second chances, Raymond. And to a family that never gave up. The laughter from the garden rose above the night air, an enduring shield against the shadows of the past, proving that while a family can be broken by choices, it can be entirely reborn through the grace of forgiveness. If you find this story meaningful, kindly like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories updates. Also, what lesson did you learn from this story? We would like to know in the comments. Thank you for watching.